Throughout this entire series, we have focused mainly on the Greek city-states in the south. But now we are going to shift focus to the north, and that of course means Macedon. As you have noticed in the last several lectures, the constant warfare in the south served only to weaken Sparta, Thebes, and Athens. This was especially the case after the Battle of Chaeroneia in 362 BC. It did seem, however, that Athens might just be able to re-establish her empire to all its former glory. And even though Athens was the most significant Greek city after the Battle of Chaeroneia, Macedon would soon emerge as a legitimate power. And this is why there was a lot at stake over the next 2 decades. From the time Philip ascended to the throne in 359, right up into the 330s, the very concept of the independent Greek city-state was under threat, because the Macedonians did not live inside a polis system. So if Philip won out, the independence of the Greek city-states would be lost. And that was something that was at the very core of the polis: independence and control of your own foreign policy. So Greece's freedom was under threat, especially as Philip later attempted to expand his influence southward by conquering all the other Greek city-states. The main opponent to Macedon during this time period were the Athenians, and you will recall that the Athenians had restored their walls and much of their fleet after the Peloponnesian War, so they remained a significant power in Greece. Now, much has been made whether or not the Macedonians were Greeks, and here are some of the main reasons that are cited. The first reason, as I mentioned, involved the polis. The Macedonians did not have a concept of the city-state that we have been talking about in previous lectures. The city-state system was far more established in southern Greece, so many Greeks in the south considered the northern Greeks almost to be semi-barbaric in nature, especially since many of the northern Greeks lived outside the polis system. So if the Macedonians didn't have a polis, what did they have? Well, they were ruled by a true king who would have had a royal court, and of course that means subjects. There were also numerous Macedonian tribes who were ruled by very powerful nobles, who were at times very loyal to the king and at other times were almost completely independent. Philip was able to unify all of these tribes and won their absolute loyalty like no king before him. In many respects, the Macedonian kingdom is something similar to the medieval feudal kingdom. Another reason involved geography. The Macedonians and many of the other tribes were located in the mountainous regions of northern Greece. Therefore, these tribes were geographically isolated from many of the civilizations along the Mediterranean. And so these northern tribes did not have the same level of exposure to civilized cultures that the southern Greeks enjoyed. Despite all of this, the Macedonians definitely considered themselves Greeks, especially during the time of Philip and Alexander. Furthermore, the Macedonians spoke Greek. Today, most historians consider the Macedonians to be Greeks. Now, before we get to Philip and Alexander, I want to step back and examine Macedon's history leading up to Philip. The early parts of Macedon's history are not well understood. Likely it involved a migration into an area located on the northern banks of the Thermaic Gulf. And if you thought there was mass chaos going on down south, it was even worse in northern Greece. A perpetual shifting of borders and alliances and broken alliances, and a never-ending sequence of treachery, assassinations, and wars. Macedon was under constant threat from several different and very ferocious tribes. One theme in the Macedonian court is an almost never-ending competition for the title of king. Therefore, it was very common for a Macedonian king to have all of his political rivals purged. And it was also common for all of the claimants to fight it out until someone emerged the victor. The Macedonians thought it was important that the king not only have a royal lineage, but also that he possessed the power to seize the throne. In fact, Philip had to depose several claimants to the throne after he became king. Now, the Argead dynasty was the ancient Greek royal house that ruled Macedon from about 700 to 310 BC. The first Macedonian kings are considered to be more legendary in nature. It isn't until the reign of Amyntas that we get some sense of actual history. Amyntas reigned between 547 and 498 BC. It was during Amyntas' reign that the Macedonians first came into contact with the Persians. Amyntas decided not to fight and gave the Persians the symbol of earth and water. After that, the Macedonian king became a vassal to the Persian king. This occurred in 514 BC. about 25 years before the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC. So by the time the Persian Wars rolled around, Macedon was under the sway of the Persians, and that would remain the case for the next several decades. It's important to note that even though Macedon was subject to Persia, they were able to retain quite a bit of autonomy during this time period. The next king, Alexander I, came to the throne on the eve of the Greco-Persian Wars, and was king of Macedon throughout the duration of the war. Shortly before the start of the Greco-Persian Wars, Macedon lost all of its remaining autonomy and was completely subject to Persia. Alexander played a key role after the Persian defeat at the Battle of Salamis in 480 BC. It was Alexander who handled the peace negotiations on behalf of the Persians. Despite being subject to the Persians, Alexander also assisted the Greek city-states in the south. He provided supplies to the Greeks and even warned them about Persian intentions before the Battle of Plataea in 479 BC. After the Persians attempted to retreat from Plataea, Alexander attacked the defeated Persians, killing thousands. After the Greco-Persian Wars ended, Macedonia broke away from Persia for good. Alexander died in 454 BC. After his death, the Macedonian kingdom fell into disarray, and many of the Macedonian tribes became almost completely independent. So after Alexander died, his eldest son, Alcides II, took the throne. Alcides' reign lasted only 6 years, as he was assassinated by his nephew Archelaus. Assassinations, as you will begin to see, were a common theme in the Macedonian royal court. After the assassination of Alcides, Perdiccas, who was Alcides' younger brother, came to the throne. It was during Perdiccas' reign that the Athenian Empire began to greatly expand. The Athenians completely dominated the nearby Thermaic Gulf, and in 437 established Amphipolis, a major trade center in the north. This posed a serious threat to Macedon, as it would be difficult for the kingdom to expand with the Athenians dominating the surrounding waters. And so the Athenians were a constant threat to the Macedonians. Going forward, Athens and Macedon had a real on and off relationship. Now in 434, Perdiccas' young brother Philip attempted to seize the throne. Athens decided to support Philip. In retaliation, Perdiccas started rebellion in several of Athens' tributary cities. Athens responded by sending a force to lay siege to Pydna. Corinth, Athens' mortal enemy, attempted to divert Athens' attention by launching an attack against Potidaea. Athens decided it needed to end the war against Macedon and formed an alliance with Perdiccas. The Athenians then marched to Potidaea. Apparently this was all a clever ruse on Perdiccas' part, as he immediately nullified the treaty with Athens and marched to support the Corinthians at Potidaea. The Athenians eventually were victorious at Potidaea, but this incident helped spark the Peloponnesian War. Perdiccas decided to support Athens during the Peloponnesian War. As a result, Athens stopped supporting the Macedonian rebel, Philip. Philip was eventually captured and that ended the rebellion. Perdiccas turned out to be a very unreliable ally for Athens. In 424, he helped the Spartans and Brasidas take Amphipolis from the Athenians. Amphipolis was one of the most important trade outposts for the Athenians, as it was a huge money maker and also provided vital timber that was used to build and repair the Athenian fleet. Soon, however, there was a falling out between Perdiccas and Sparta, and once again Macedon became an ally to Athens in 423. He would switch alliances several more times before his death in 413 BC. Next, Archelaus came to the throne by murdering several of his rivals. In that same year, Athens suffered a devastating defeat in Sicily, in which their entire fleet was destroyed. After this setback, Athens needed timber to rebuild their decimated fleet. Archelaus came to the rescue and supplied Athens with a massive amount of Macedonian timber. Fresh with new money from the sale of the timber to Athens, Archelaus embarked upon an ambitious infrastructure project, improving the road system in Macedon. He even constructed a new palace at Pella. Archelaus was assassinated in 399 BC during a hunting expedition. His death led to 10 years of instability and intrigue inside the Macedonian court. Orestes was the son of Archelaus and successor king of his murdered father. He was attended ever so closely by his guardian, Oropus II. Together they jointly ruled until 396 BC. After that, Oropus ruled solely for 1 year in 395 BC. Archelaus II of Macedon succeeded his father Oropus II, but his reign did not last long. He was killed on a hunting trip, either by accident or assassination, but most likely assassination. I think you get an idea here of all the plots and assassinations going on in the Macedonian court. So after Archelaus was assassinated, his son Amyntas III claimed the throne. Amyntas established an alliance with the Chalcidian League led by Olynthus. In exchange for their support, Amyntas agreed to provide the Olynthians with Macedonian timber, which was then sent on to Athens to help fortify their fleet. It was during Amyntas' reign that a new threat emerged. Bardylus, the king of the Dardanians, invaded Macedon in 393 BC. Bardylus used innovative tactics to defeat the Macedonians on the battlefield. After the victory, he expelled Amyntas III. Bardylus then installed a puppet king. In 392 BC, Amyntas III allied with Thessaly, and it was through this alliance he was able to take Macedon back from the Dardanians. However, the Dardanians were a constant menace to the western and northern frontiers of Macedon. After almost continuous invasions, Bardyllis was able to force Macedon to pay him an annual tribute in 372 BC. Amyntas had 3 sons, Alexander II, Perdiccas III, and Philip II. His oldest son, Alexander II, ascended to the throne in 371 BC. Alexander immediately faced a Dardanian invasion from the northwest and an attack from the east by a pretender named Pausanias. Pausanias quickly captured several cities and threatened the queen mother, who was at the palace in Pella with her young sons. Alexander defeated his enemies with the help of the Athenian general Iphicrates, who had been sailing along the Macedonian coast on the way to recapture Amphipolis. However, Alexander's victory was short-lived, as he was assassinated during a festival. The plot was hatched by Alexander's ambitious brother-in-law, Ptolemy. Ptolemy's attempt to take the throne failed, though, as Alexander's younger brother Perdiccas III was made king. Perdiccas, however, was too young to rule, so Ptolemy became his regent. So this was sort of a partial victory for Ptolemy. It has been suggested that Ptolemy's activities were probably the reason that the young Philip spent some time in exile in Thebes, where he acquired an excellent military education. When Perdiccas III came of age, he ordered the immediate death of Ptolemy and took complete control over Macedon. Perdiccas saw it as his mission to reconquer Upper Macedonia from the Dardanians. He marched north in the spring of 359 BC to take on the Dardanians and their king Bardyllis. The Macedonian army was absolutely annihilated, losing 4,000 men. The Dardanians followed up on the victory by expanding their control southward to Lake Ohrid and westward into Upper Macedonia. Through these actions, Bardyllis came close to eliminating Macedon for good. Many historians have criticized the Dardanians for not pushing deeper into Macedon, especially with the Macedonian army on the verge of total collapse. In any event, Perdiccas was killed in the battle against the Dardanians, and this would clear the way for Philip II to claim the throne, and we will get to that in the next lecture.